Okay, welcome to Queer Spirit Rising, the gay man's guide to sacred aging, where we continue this exploration of the sacred journey of healing, of wisdom and pride for gay and queer men who are embracing elderhood, right? You and me. So, my name is Anthony Rios, and we're going to walk this path on this next chapter of our life to become even more whole, vibrant, and free. I'm talking to gay men, queer men over the age of 50, over the age of 60. And again, my name is Anthony Rios, and today we're going to talk about shame, something that many of us carry in silence. And it's not just shame that was handed to us by family or by religion, but it's the kind of shame that tells us that today, even now, that our spiritual hunger, the spiritual need is misplaced and misguided. And that's really the wrong way to look at it. And it's something that has been ingrained in us since we were children. But I'm here to tell you that whenever you have that feeling that your spiritual hunger is misplaced, that need is misplaced or misguided, that's trauma. That is a wounded elder. Okay, because our queerness and our sacredness cannot live apart. Our queerness and our sacredness are one. They cannot be separated. And I know that society and religion, especially the Judeo-Christian religions, the way that we were brought up, most of us here in the United States, in this belief of you're a sinner, you're going to burn in hell, you're bringing shame to your family, to religion, and to God, and all this kind of stuff. That's what's misplaced. That's what's misguided, are those that dogma, that indoctrination that's wounded us since we were children. I first heard that stuff when I was in catechism school in the Catholic schools, at 10, 12 years old. So, and some, I know a lot of you went to Bible school and Bible camp and all that stuff in the summertime when you were kids. You heard that there too. So that's what's misplaced. Because see, I believe that our queerness and our sacredness together it's not a defective thing. It's beautiful, and we have to talk about it. We really, really have to talk about it and reconcile who we are as spiritual divine beings and gay and queer people, right? And for me, it's not a big jump or a leap, but for many people it is. I remember, see, what I want to talk about is us reclaiming this truth about who we are as spiritual divine beings. But I just want to say as an aside, I remember back in the 90s when I was in my 20s and the early 1990s, so my 20s and 30s, that there was a group of us, a group of guys who were members of Dignity. Dignity was a gay Catholic organization. And the Catholic Church would not give us a space to hold Mass. And I don't remember where we held it at. This was in Houston in the 80s and 90s. And we held it at some building. Well, we had Mass on Sundays. And there was a deacon who would come and do Mass, right? He would give Mass and Eucharist and Holy Communion and all that. So, but we were rejected by the Catholic Church, obviously back then and probably still now, the way it goes. But so we had to meet in a separate location. And we did. For many years, Dignity did that. And I remember every time they would ask for a space, the church would say no. And even at Easter and Holy Week, we would do our own readings and do our own thing. It was quite beautiful. Then there was another group of gay guys that I would hang around with, and we would go to Mass at a very large Catholic church in Houston every Sunday. And then we'd go have brunch afterwards. But it would always like puzzle me that because I was devout enough to go to Mass, but it would always puzzle me. I'm like, okay, we were out on Saturday night doing our thing, having a great time, drinking, drugging, having lots of sex, and then we were at Mass at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, right? So that is not an uncommon thing for Catholic queers. But I just wanted to say that as an aside. I remember that. But part of it was guilt. Part of it was guilt. You had to go to church, right? You had to go to church because of the motions and all that thing. That's not spirituality. That's dogma. That's indoctrination. That's the defective part. See, you're already divine. You were born in the image of the Creator, in the image of the divine. So we walk around with the shame, and yeah, we have to name it. We have to call it what it is. We walked around with shame. And some people even further had disgust in themselves for all the partying they did on a Saturday night, and then they tried to reconcile that by going to Mass on Sunday morning, right? So that's all about shame and low self-worth, low self-esteem, zero self-love, all around this indoctrination. Being indoctrinated that something's wrong with you, that you're a sinner, that you're going to burn in hell, and that's messed up, right? That's messed up. So really, while you're listening here, I want you to just see where you have this internalized spiritual shame still going on. because we were raised in these traditions that had us feel like we were wrong, unclean, right? Mentally defective, for sure unwelcome. And for me, it was unwelcome in the Catholic Church. That was quite obvious. And in families, in your family environment, for many of us, it was unspoken. So they just knew you were different. They didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about it, right? So silence, side glances, maybe little whispers at family gatherings and family events. But you were the one going by yourself every time there was a wedding or some event like that. So on one level, you're kind of excluded from sacred roles in organized religion. But again, that's to me, that's not spirituality. That's dogma and indoctrination, right? But what happens is that indoctrination from an early age of that something's wrong with you, you're a sinner, you're going to burn in hell, you're mentally defective, you're bringing shame, all the stuff that I mentioned. What happens is that turns into you not trusting your own gut, your own intuition for who you are as a spiritual being. You don't believe anymore that you're a spiritual being. You don't believe anymore that you're deserving of God's love or the love of light, right? The divine. You don't believe anymore that you're worthy. That's where these sacred or these emotional and spiritual wounds become embedded in us and ingrained in us, and that's the trauma. So in a previous episode, I talked about the wounded elder. This is what I'm talking about from the spiritual perspective. We grew up this way. We were wounded in that way from religion, from dogma, and we carry this with us. And that's a wounded elder. So we're walking around with this trauma, you know, and it creates a spiritual disconnection. Some people leave the church and religion altogether. Some people leave and come back, go back and forth. Some people find another path. I found another path. And that's what a little bit I'll talk about that with you here. But the big wound that gets created when you're brought up to believe that you're not worthy of God's love or the love of the divine light. I say God a lot, but when I say that, I'm really talking about the creator, divine spirit. I am a firm believer in the light. There's a great divine light that illuminates us, and you're part of that light. So you want to understand that this whole part about holding on to that shame and that guilt doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do you any good. I'm just messing with something here to look at my notes because, I love taking my notes here. Part of the thing you understand is that the shame, it doesn't just hurt us, it makes us withdraw, and it shrinks our connection, and really it causes the disconnection. It makes us not trust ourselves and not realize the beauty that's in us, in that divinity, in that sacred essence of you. And we lose our power and our ability to walk around in the world as a spiritual leader that you really are. All of us are spiritual leaders in our own way and healers in our own way. But when you've gotten disconnected and you don't put any attention to it, you're lost. And that was exactly my experience when I left the Catholic Church when I was 29. I was lost and I needed something to fill that spiritual void, and I had to search for it. And I found it, thankfully, in the world of shamanism and shamanic practice. And then the full embrace of my traditional roots in Mexico of curanderismo. But when you're lost and you don't trust your own intuition to guide you spiritually, that's the cost. It's the shame makes you withdraw and makes you be disconnected in such a way that you don't know which way to turn. So, what I'd like you to do, if you're still listening here, if you're following me, and I appreciate the fact that you're listening, and if this resonates with you, please subscribe to the podcast. But now look, just take a breath because our body tells us everything. Our body tells us everything that we need to know about how we're feeling, our emotional state, our mental state, and just take a moment and be with your body and take a breath and just recall the first time that you felt spiritually wrong for being gay, being queer. And where does that memory live in your body? You may have to put your hand on your heart. I do that a lot with just some nice breath work. Like, where does that memory live in my body? The first time I felt spiritually wrong. For me, I remember being, I don't know, 10 or 11 in catechism. And it doesn't hurt to revisit that without judgment and with full compassion for yourself, because there's a lot of messages that you can get for healing of those spiritual wounds just by sitting in reflection and asking what was happening, what was going on. You don't have to relive the trauma, but you can engage with it and just ask for any insight. And there's a sacredness of the breath. It's very healing. And if you just listen for the answer with compassion, without judgment, without judging yourself or making yourself wrong, I think you'll be able to get some good answers. And we do this in some of the work that I do in groups, a lot of really good sacred breathing, just to find out where is it in my body that this memory lives, because these memories do live in our body, and we can deal with them and we can honor them and acknowledge them and heal them, right? We can heal all of this. So that's one thing. The other thing on this journey of reclaiming our gay spiritual identity is to understand that your being gay, your being queer is a great source of personal and spiritual power, right? We see things from completely different way. So being gay, being queer is inherently spiritual, because if you believe that we're created in the image of the divine, then of course being gay is spiritual. Of course being queer is spiritual. Of course, absolutely, of course. So it's something it's not a big leap, right? To wrap your head around that. And the way we live challenges the status quo, obviously. We challenge the binary world, obviously. But I used to say like in myth and in legend, but really it's a historical fact. All you have to do is go look it up. We've always walked between the worlds. We've always walked between genders. We've always walked outside of the box, right? On a different path. And it's there, it's in the historical record. In shamanic journey work, we can even journey to our gay and queer ancestors and get lots of information and answers for us as we live today. So throughout history, you'll find us. And you hear a lot of that if you follow other gay and queer writers and authors and podcasters and all that content people, you'll hear that, right? And I am a firm believer, because like in all the work that I do, the traditional healing, the shamanic work, there's a lot of gay people, a lot of queer people. We've always been here and we're going to stay here. We're not going anywhere. So that's where you want to begin to be able to reclaim your gay spiritual identity, your queer spirit rising, especially now that we're over the age of 50, over the age of 60, to bring all of that together so that you've got a deep and solid foundation to stand on as you look forward to your role as an elder in the community to share your wisdom, to impart your wisdom with other people. There are a couple of ways that there are some practices that we can do to start reconnecting. Now, in my group work and one-on-one work, we do shamanic journey work, we do soul retrieval, things like that for people. But in your everyday life, here's a couple of things. I'll give you some ideas that you can use to practice reconnecting with your spiritual identity, reconnecting with your divine essence, reconnecting with the creator, with source. Okay. So you just reimagine prayer, reimagine how you are devoted in prayer. You don't have to pray the way that you were taught as a child. And some of you still do, and it could be quite beautiful, but it doesn't have to be exactly that way. You can pray when you're on a treadmill. You can pray when you're in meditation. You can pray when you're journaling. You can pray when you just light a candle in your home, right? I love being out in nature. I get a lot of insight when I'm on the treadmill, right? I get a lot of insight when I'm walking out on the beach. I live at the beach. But your spiritual practice should be something that you're very, very comfortable with, where you feel at home and not excluded from, right? So if you go into a church and you sit by yourself in some section of the church, you're not really there with everybody else. That's exclusion. You don't want to feel that way. You want to be part of your own spiritual practice. That's why I'm always encouraging people to make up a new ritual for themselves, a new ceremony for themselves. And that's one of the things that'll really give us a lot of power as gay and queer people, is to create our own rituals and rites of passage and ceremonies for us with our own spiritual perspective. So that's one thing. I always like people to create their own prayers and their own blessings, right? Create your own blessing. I do, and some people call these affirmations, and I like a good affirmation. I think affirmations are very, very helpful. They help to rewire the brain, rewire the subconscious brain, and they'll help you a long way on your spiritual path. So you could just simply create a prayer for yourself or a blessing for yourself, like, I bless this person who thought he was wrong. I bless this person who is perfect, who is whole, who is complete, who is divine. I bless this person. You could say it looking at yourself in the mirror. I bless this person and his divine connection. I bless this person in his divine essence. Or you could say it differently. I am holy. I am divine. I am holy. I am divine. I am a sacred being. I am divine. I am a beautiful, sacred being. I'm a beautiful, sacred being. These affirmations will take you a long, long way. The other thing to understand about all this is you don't need anyone's permission to do this kind of practice. You don't need anyone's permission to be sacred because you're already sacred. You're already divine and holy. Holiness is not like reserved for saints or some kind of special person or anything like that. No, we're all walking as holy people, as sacred people. So you just need to reconnect with your divine essence. Remember who you are as that divine creation. Practice love for yourself, self love. Practice compassion with yourself. Practice kindness with yourself, right? Because we're all human, but we're all sacred human beings. And just remember with your breath, it'll guide you to the truth. It'll guide you with love. Just lean into love and it will work out for you. So part of this is just really training yourself to reconnect with your divine essence, reconnect with who you are as a sacred being, and really reconnect with the light. Reconnect with the light. It'll take you a long way. So I'm going to leave this there for now. If this resonates with you, subscribe to the podcast, share it with your queer brothers. Leave your comments. I like to read the comments. And we'll talk again real soon. So thank you for listening to Queer Spirit Rising, a gay man's guide to aging, to sacred aging. My name is Anthony Rios, and I really appreciate your time and taking the time to listen. All right. So we'll talk again real soon. Bye now. Looking for some